There was something else. Can you tell me what the doc needs with Chimera?
No idea. Not sure what you're referring to. Afraid Doc doesn't have much respect for the maintenance staff. Guess he doesn't put much stock in cleaning floors, old Hank muttered.
I nodded, then tried to think of who might have countermanded orders to kill Sanguine. Who would know about Chimera and want to keep him alive? A chill ran through me. Old Hank, does the name Golden Blood mean anything to you? The robot just stared at me for the longest time, and I frowned. Hank? The robot's buzzsaw whirled as it seized me by the throat with a pincher and plunged the rotating blade straight at my face. I brought up my forelegs as the saw teeth sputtered and sparked off the enamel. This thing had me outnumbered on fighting limbs and was way too close for me to bring my battle saddle guns to bear. His cutting torch flared to life as a metallic scream sounded from the speakers. I had only one thing going for me: traction. I blocked the saw and torch as best I could and powered forward with my hind legs. The robot's levitation talisman didn't slow at all as I powered it into the far wall and pulled back, and slammed it again and again. Finally, something inside the robot popped and crackled, and the levitation talisman went dark. The robot fell onto the ground, the shriek dwindling into a soft crackle and then falling silent. I pulled my throat out of its pinchered grip and sighed. Guess so, I muttered, looking up the shaft. There was no sign of my friends. I suppose they were going to find another way down to me. I sighed, looking at my hooves and weapons. I really missed my telekinesis. As solid a rig as the battle saddle was, I simply wasn't as good with it as Glory. I kept getting in fights where I just couldn't shift my body as I needed to. I carefully removed it, sticked it in my bags, and bundled up Taurus's rifle and the shotgun. Scotch still had vigilance. The sword would probably be too long and ungainy to wield in my mouth. How the heck did ponies without magic fight with those things? Well, guess it's just me and my own four hooves for now. As silently as I could, I picked a tunnel at random and made my way down it. I tried not to think of Glory and Scotch. I tried not to imagine. I stopped and thumped my head hard on the concrete floor. No, no, no. We're not going to do this now. Priest was bad enough, I muttered, then winced and rubbed my head. And now I'm starting to talk to myself. Okay. So I wasn't at my finest right then. The tunnels were all Hoofington stand... Wait. Strike that. The Blue Line subway tunnels had at least shown signs of damage, rust, and overall decay. These walls were crack-free. A product of old Hank's work, or was it just because they were even more over-engineered than the rest of the underground? I suppose it really didn't matter. I traveled further along and reached some sort of security station in front of a heavy door. There were bones behind a bulletproof glass, and a sidearm. An IF-38 Cornhusker revolver. Not the most powerful gun, but it had a mouth grip that I could use comfortably without the battle saddle. In the break room behind the station were folded out cots and some lockers that I cleared out, and a terminal. I chewed on my lip. This really was more P-21's thing. Still, I knew the basics. Go to the login prompt, hold down those two keys there to get the debug, and look for words that might be the password. Failed too often, and it'd lock up permanently. 10 minutes later, I felt a surge of glee as I picked out the password from the junk. Cider. There wasn't much in the terminal. Duty rosters and a complaint field against one security buck for being scared of the lower levels. Then there was an option to open the door. I bit my lip and toggled it. The door lifted up and revealed a little shack, practically invisible behind a concrete slip nestled right up against a cliff face. I heard the river flowing by and carefully poked my head out. There was Zenith Bridge off to my left. I barely suppressed a scream of frustration. This whole time, there was a back door to this place. Ugh. Without a way to tell Acuna there wasn't any reason to leave it open and invite trouble inside, I closed it up and retraced my steps. picking my way along the other tunnel. Conduits and pipes ran along the walls and ceiling. I suspected that this was a maintenance access of some sort. I ran across a little alcove with a workbench and shelves of engineering supplies, as well as some ammo containers. I chowed down on some nice juicy steel nuts and bolts as I practiced my telekinesis on a bobby pin in the lock of one of the ammo boxes. The most I could manage at the moment. The first one snapped after a few fumbles, but I felt a little surge of pride as the second popped the lock. Blech. All magic gem cartridges and spark drums. Then I pursed my lips and placed one of the cartridges in the workbench vise. After a bit of determined twisting, the plastic lid popped off the cartridge's base. I carefully shook some of the rainbow dust within onto my tongue, and the crystalline specks popped and crackled delightfully. Not exactly the same as a whole gemstone, but still. A low snuffling and ruffle filled the air, making my eyes widen. Something was walking nearby, with slow, dragging, heavy steps. I slowly poked my head back into the tunnel in time to spot the dark hindquarters of something moving out of sight. Very carefully, I moved down after it as the scrap dust and metal restored my damaged limbs. The passageway I was in was opening up into some kind of storeroom. Clearly, old Hank's cleaning routine ended here. The floor was strewn with crushed and scattered drums. Rainbow goop was splattered all over the place. And the thing was moving somewhere inside. I slipped slowly out into the room and worked my way around, keeping opposite the thing and moving as quietly as possible. My rear hoof stepped in some of the goop, and I felt a momentary spike of concern as I looked back. But other than feeling like I'd stepped in something foul, nothing was happening. Okay, another point for cyber limbs. I just had to keep it off my hide. Maybe it was time to bust out the... Wasn't there a thing in here I was supposed to be keeping an eye on? A bellow nearly shook me off my hooves, as I turned and looked down between the battered, tottery shelving at what I assumed was once a pony. 4 hooves, head, and tail. That was a pony, right? It was as if some pony had started there and then suffered some sort of psychotic vision of massive twisted knots and flesh and barely restrained bulk. The pale form's bloodshot eyes glared at me around wet leathery straps that seemed to be holding most of its body together. However, all that was secondary to the size of its mouth, which was filled with broken, stone-like teeth. With shocking speed, the ungainly thing spun and kicked the intact drum down the aisle at me. I barely ducked as it struck the rack behind me and burst. Quickly as I could, I was running from the droplets of whatever the contents were. Really, hazardous material suit. Sounded great, especially having doffed the battle saddle. Really, I could have done with having something a little higher caliber at my disposal too. When this was over, I was going to take a few days to try and get my horn back in order. The pony behemoth, which I suspected was one of Precious's fatties, came charging around the end of the row. Its broad hooves smashed and scattered the barrels that had fallen. Big as I could handle, but big and fast. I slipped into Sats to... No, I didn't! Instead, I realized that Sats was gone just in time to dive to the side as the colossal hooves plunged towards me. Don't roll, don't slide on your belly, put some damn distance between you and it. An instinctive part of me wanted to flee back down to the tunnel, but big as this thing was, I knew it would fit. I had to do something else. I had to go up. I leapt up to the second tier of shelving and extended my freaky fingers to grab the edge of the third. I clambered up, then to the fourth. Beneath me, the behemoth howled and smashed the base of the shelves again and again. I was nearly knocked free as the whole structure swayed. I reached the very top, though, and looked down at the glaring beast beneath me. Okay, Rover was really right. Thumbs were saving my life more than guns. The thing howled and kicked at the shelves again. bending steel with each powerful blow, and the shelves gave another ominous sway. "Hey! Knock it off!" I shouted, looking at the heavy barrels and things stacked on the shelves around me, and then at the floor way, way below me. A little light lit in my brain as I grinned down. "Hey! Don't knock it off!" A little blue pony in my head had come up with an idea, and it was gonna be awesome. I shoved a barrel over the edge, barely missing the pony creature. It bellowed in rage and slammed the shelves again. Then the metal groaned, and there was a loud ping as something gave, and then more pings. And once the shelves stopped swaying and began steadily moving, that was building momentum. The pony creature realized its peril, began to move its bulk as the shelves tumbled over, and dumped thousands of pounds of drums in a cascade of steel and chemicals that poured down on top of it. The shelves were coming apart, dumping steel beams and shelving atop it as I felt the sideways momentum start to come into a downward motion. I leapt for the next set of shelves as the collapsing set smashed into it, scrambling to keep up and away from the leaking rainbow goo. I looked down at the pile. If it wasn't dead, then I'd give up. Carefully, I scrambled my way down and trot back towards the workroom. I bust out the hazardous materials suit, but having discovered the joy of thumbs, I hesitated, then broke out the sword. Somewhere, I was sure, a hazardous materials specialist was weeping as I cut off the ends of the suit's forelegs and stuck my limbs through. Then I wiggled the rest of my way into the yellow suit, leaving my barding on underneath it. Used a whole roll of duct tape to seal the gaps around my legs and tugged the saddlebags around my waist. I balked at the helmet. Without my EFS, I'd only need to rely on my eyes and ears more, and my mouth was the only way I was going to be able to use the revolver at all. I returned to the storeroom and stalked past the oozing rainbow heap. I paused for the longest time, my ears straining for as much as a sign that the thing was going to get back up and come after me. Small favors. It was so much goo beneath the steel. Now, as long as I didn't meet a similar fate, I was happy. Trotting past it, I moved into the hall. I looked at the translucent starburst flanks of Twilight Sparkle and the scarred hide of Blood. The hallway was a mess of rainbow gunk and ooze. Ponies in lab coats and hazardous material suits trot past, appearing and disappearing as they moved. I sat down hard, immobilized at the sight. It really is an impressive facility, but I can't help but notice some similarities in the layout, she said as she looked dryly at the exhausted buck. What? Did you simply steal Mariponi's design and bury it underground?
Steal? Of course not, he said in a faintly hurt tone. Stealing implies removal. We steal from stable tech. We copy from the MAS.
He took a misstep and fell to his knees with a groan. Blood, are you all right? She knelt beside him and helped nudge him to his feet. You look, well, worse than usual?
No, I'm all right. But you needn't concern yourself with me. You've learned some unpleasant things today.
He rasped as he stood to a groan. I'm sorry I pressed Luna to remove you. I wanted to work with you, Blood. I thought that was the whole point of your office, she said as she looked at him sternly. He blinked at her, as if not even comprehending what she'd just said, before he smiled tiredly.
Oh, that? No, that's hardly a point to bother. My removal was inevitable, though I hadn't realized how much more of a trial protecting others from my mistakes would be, he said with a sigh. Regardless, if everything turns out as it should, it won't matter much.